Hi, I'm Nick Bonner, and this is my good friend Nick Araya in from sunny Los Angeles, California. Nick, how are you?
Hot.
Welcome. Thanks for coming. We're happy to join you tonight. We're here in Indianapolis, and we are presenting cabling, bracing, a little bit of propping,
Yep.
some black magic maybe.
Yeah, some voodoo. Yeah, tree voodoo.
Awesome. Well, we've got Carson Royer on the control booth. We've got our new guy, Jake Miller, on the camera. Myself, Nick Bonner,
Yep.
Nick Araya. We're pretty much ready to go.
I
we
think
will
so.
have a CEU quiz after the broadcast.
Yeah.
So please stick around. We'll post the link to that in the comments.
Yes.
And in a separate post. It will work. If it doesn't work for you, I don't know what to tell you, because it works for everybody every time. You do have to pass the test to get your CEUs. We will turn the CEUs in a week or two to the ISA. It takes a couple of weeks, sometimes a month, for them to report them. If you have questions about that, please contact the ISA. We can't make them process it any faster, but we don't want to bother them because we're really, really appreciative of all the support that they give us.
Absolutely.
This is like our 10th webinar that they've supported with CEUs, which we just think is really fantastic. So a couple other things I want to talk about. We are getting ready, Carson and I, with some other members of the Notch team, are heading down to Puerto Rico. We leave Sunday, 2 days from today, June 10th, 2018. We're going to be working at 4 nonprofit areas in and around San Juan.
What are you going to be doing down there?
So apparently, I have not been there, but in these 4 nonprofit campuses, it's like Hurricane Maria was last week. Nothing has been done. There's no funding or anything. So we're going to be cleaning up the grounds, restoring access, entranceways.
Yeah.
One of the places we're working at is the National Olympic Training Center.
Cool.
Which is really cool. So we'll be down there. You can stay tuned to our Facebook and Instagram, as well as the Notch Facebook and Instagram. There will be updates on Project Puerto Rico there. So big thanks to the 15 or so Arborist volunteers that are going to come meet us down there. They're all traveling down on their own dime. I'm sure some of you guys are watching, so I very much appreciate that. Carson, have I forgotten anything, or can I turn it over to Nick? Jambo. Jambo is coming up. You'll be there?
No, I won't be there.
Nick's going to be there. We're going to have a dunk tank. You will be able to dunk Nick Araya with a throw ball. Jambo is the 13th, 14th, and 15th of July here in Indianapolis, Indiana at Holiday Park, where we had it last year. We're going to be able to camp in the park this year, which is awesome. So we will return to kind of the festival feel that we started Jambo with, spending 3 days in the park with the competition, camping, food, all in one place. A really big atmosphere for everybody to get together and enjoy the tree family thing. So Jambo, July 13th, 14th, 15th. There's a couple competitor spots left. We just opened a few more up. So if you want to get in on those, there's just a couple left. So buy that. Go to treestuff.com and check it out. I think that's enough of me. I think they want some more Nick Araya.
Yes. Doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you guys. I'm going to go man the camera.
Okay, we're working off this camera right here. Which one? This one. Okay, I'm going to go to that one. All right, guys. First of all, before we get started, I want to thank Tree Stuff for giving me the opportunity to share this information with you. The stuff we're going to cover today is a topic I'm really passionate about. If you know my company at all, you know that we strive to save as many trees as possible. We're not the company that's out there looking for the next big removal. I get more excited for a big cabling or bracing job than I do for a $3,000 removal job. So it's hot outside. It's about 95 degrees and I'm sweating just standing here. So I think you guys will get to enjoy seeing it pour when I actually start doing anything. So what we're going to talk about today: cabling, bracing, and propping trees. It's a little bit of a controversial topic in our industry, mostly because of A, the potential for liability exposure to you or the owner of the tree, and then B, the potential for damage being done to the tree by the things we're actually doing to potentially help the tree. And we'll address both of those things while going through some of the specifics of how to install different kind of cables and termination systems and things like that. So without further ado, I think we'll go straight to talking about dynamic cable first. As we move to each little section here, we're going to talk about why we use certain types of systems on certain types of trees and how you can find those things as you're out looking, in people's homes, in their yards, checking out their trees, what you need to be on the lookout for so you know when to apply these techniques. So let's talk about cabling first. When you're cabling a tree, you basically have two choices. Are you going to go with the steel cable, which is much more traditional, bugs everywhere, much more traditional, stronger strength, but really limits the movement of the tree. And nowadays we have dynamic cable. It's gaining in popularity. It has some limitations in that it probably needs to be inspected a little more or replaced a little more often than a steel cable would, but that's a good thing. We want to create situations where the arborist needs to come out and see the tree more often. If you take a moment to look at a tree and you decide it needs a supplemental support system, that's probably reason alone that you should come out and look at it every few years anyways. But I would say the same is true about a big gigantic tree close to a structure or anywhere that people are going. Even if it looks almost perfect, just by virtue of it being big, an arborist should come and look at it every year or two or three. So having a cable doesn't mean we're taking an extra risk, because what if we don't come out in 3 years to look at it? Someone should be going out there regardless. So today we're going to install a cable here at ground level, a dynamic cable, and it's going to be silly because we're going to be cabling it to this dead tree right here. I've decided that this will be our practice tree. So when we're installing a dynamic cable, we want the tree to move. We're intentionally looking at a tree that maybe the union that we're trying to support isn't horrible. We're noticing that co-dominant characteristic where the trunk splits into a Y, but maybe it's really long. The limbs, excuse me, are really, really long, but where they come down together, it does have a bit of a U, but there's a little bit of concern on the arborist's behalf. Not enough that we feel we need a steel cable and a whole bunch of bolts to yank it all together, but the union isn't good enough that we feel comfortable just walking away from it. That's a really good place for a dynamic cable. When I install dynamic cables, or when my employees install dynamic cables, we're usually installing them with a little bit of slack in the system, and I'll show you how much we tend to use. And the idea is that in natural day-to-day breezes, the tree's moving and it's still allowed to move, because as arborists we know moving trees equals stronger trees. We want that reaction wood to build up, and so the dynamic cable will allow that reaction wood to still build up on a day-to-day basis. But when there is massive windstorm, a massive wind event, maybe there's rain and all that extra water on the tree equals hundreds or thousands of extra pounds of force, the wind will push the limbs apart until the rope goes taut. And that's when it's going to hold it just for that moment at the peak wind, which is ironic that the wind is blowing stronger right now. And then as the wind lets go, the rope goes slack again, and it's again not doing anything. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm just going to tie it in a knot over here on this side, and then we'll actually do the installation on the other side. Before we get started, I want to show you the two things that I need to do this. This is the custom Tree Care LA bag. You could get any backpack that will do this. And I've got this nice little leather tool sleeve right here. And you need a fid of some sort, and I like the Yale cordage basket fid, a roll of tape, and you'll need some scissors. We used to carry a lot of other tools. You can see all the spaces for them, and we learned over time that they weren't essential. So we're not even gonna go into detail on those guys. And then that all goes inside here. And then we also have inside here spare parts, because if you're up in the tree, you might drop something. It does happen on occasion, and rather than having your ground guys looking all over, you can just get back to work and then grab it when you get down to the ground. So those are the tools, and then here are the supplies that we'll need. I have this is the Notch Dryad dynamic cable. And this is the 1/2-inch version of it, and then this is my chafe sleeve, and we have them running through the hydration tubes of the hydration channels, I guess we'd call that, for the backpack. So it works out really well. And let's go ahead and get to it. Now, we're going to simulate me being up in the tree. We're also going to simulate me having a helmet on because it's way too hot for that right now. And we've already assessed the area. We know it's pretty safe. So up in the tree, I'm going to install this side of the cable first. And don't zoom in on this part, Jake, because this is just going to be a round clove hitch backed off with another clove hitch. So let's ignore that. So we'll pretend that I have my tie-in point on that side or somewhere centrally overhead. I can now traverse over, leaving the backpack on, and the rope will come out. I found that it kind of gets a little annoying, so what I'll do is just take it over my shoulder with me as I'm going. And now from this side, I can actually do the work. You're gonna need to move laterally towards the other side. We can take these glasses off, we don't need those. So it helps if your tie-in point is centrally located, or at least not pulling you further in that direction. So the first decision I have to make is where am I going to install this cable, and then you know what I just realized? We're going to be better off, Jake, if you can step back that way. We're going to come to this this limb over here, and I'll show you guys why in a moment. We have to make the decision where we're going to install this limb, and then we're going to have to make the decision on how much cable to cut. So steel cable, which more people are familiar with, you can install anywhere along the stem because you're going to drill a hole and put the hardware secured to the tree. The dynamic cable is just going around the limb, so if I just put it on right here, it can slip downward. So luckily I have this big giant branch right here on this box elder, and we all know that that's nice and strong, so that's what's going to hold for me. And I'm going to start pulling kind of taut, just hand tight, and I'm going to simulate going around that limb. We don't need to actually go around. And I'm going to go about that much. I'm not measuring this. I don't expect you guys to bring a measuring tape up with you up into the tree. It's about that much. Then I can hold on to this guy, and that's where I'm going to cut it. So at this point, I usually will hold it in my mouth, take my backpack off, but what we'll do here, so you don't have to hear me mumble, is we'll tie that right there, and that'll be my spot where I'm going to cut it. And one of my favorite features of this tool bag is that there's a strap to affix it to the tree. So now I'm up in the tree, I'm unencumbered by the tool bag, and I have all my tools laid out for me. And tool number one, we can untie this again, get a little bit of tape, and we have to do two things here. One, we have to cut it, and then two, we have to make our taper. So I'm going to do this in two separate motions. Now, if you know me, you know that I love splicing rope. I like to think I'm pretty darn good at it. I tend to be very precise and neat and tidy. When I do dynamic cable, I don't carry that same level of precision up in the tree. I want it to be good enough. I want it to be as good as what the average person is doing out there. The rope is strong and the rope is very malleable, so I don't need to be super picky about it, and you'll see that here when I do this. So I'm going to take off this tape section right here. Oh, one moment. Take a piece of tape and put that right here. That's going to come in handy later. And we're going to unravel, and then we'll cut a taper just in the last 2 inches. And I like to cut it right over the pocket right here because that keeps the garbage from floating into the ocean. And now I'm going to hold this together because it'll come apart on me. And then I grab this piece of tape and I want to make a nice tight bullet. And this part will be a little more precise on. And I'm pulling it as tight as I think I can without the tape breaking on me. And I tend to go up to the end and then work my way back a little. Okay, that should be sufficient. Now, that part is done. What I'm going to do is put a little slip knot on it and slip that onto my harness right here. And we're gonna ignore that for a moment. You know what, let's put this on my actual belt. I think we're gonna lose it. And then the next thing we have to do is cut some chafe sleeve. Dynamic cable has the ability, the negative trait that it's a soft piece of material rubbing on a rough piece of living thing. And it has the potential to damage the tree. The tree also has the potential to damage the rope. So we have our chafe sleeve in here. And the amount that I pull, I usually go equal to the length of the limb and then just a little bit further. So it comes out beyond the edge of the limb. And this part, it doesn't have to be super precise either. So I'm just holding it with my finger and then we'll cut that. I'm sure there's a formula of the length of this should be equal to the 2/3 of the circumference or something silly like that, but we don't need to measure it. So what I'm doing is getting something that extends just a little bit beyond both sides. And now I can take the tail of the dynamic cable, and on this one I can run it straight through. If you are attaching it to a much wider limb, you'll want to attach the tail onto the basket fid first and then run it through the chafe sleeve. But so I used to really measure this out, mark the length of my tail, figure out where the splice is going to go, and try to match it all up the way I would do an actual splice. And I've learned over time that that's really tedious. It wastes a lot of time and it isn't necessary. So now at this point, I can pull all of this tail out, and this is the first time where we need to talk about tension. Jake, I think if you swing around to this side, and we can watch the rope here, and what we want to know is how tight is this going to be. Now, with the steel cable, we would really cinch it down so it's perfectly tight. But I can tell you it's extremely challenging to install this without using a come-along to give you some slack to work with. And we don't want that level of tension here. So I'm going to let this go, and we're going to create quite a bit of a belly. This is about a 20-foot long span right here, and you can see there's a lot of wobble. In fact, I'm going to give it a little extra, and if we decide that that's too much, we can correct that towards the end of the splice. So now we're going to look here. Normally, we would probably put this right about here. But I've also figured out that it helps to make the eye kind of goofily big, like make it way too big. So at this point, I'm going to use the fid and just run it through, and trying not to split the strands on each side, trying to be even all the way through, and then we just pull it. And we're not going to tension anything just yet. Now, we don't need to count each strand. You just go down about that far. How far is that? Well, it's about 2 inches. Some dynamic cables have tracer strands, and you can just go 1 tracer strand length. And we're just going to go a few times. By a few, I'm thinking 4 to 6. And we're going all the way through, back and forth. So we've gone 1, 2, 3. And it helps if I bunch it up a little here, take a little bit of that tension off. And it really doesn't have to be perfect. This is one of those times when you can think production while you're doing a splice. That's 4. We'll go ahead and do 1 more just for the fun of it. Okay. Now the final one, I'm sure you can, if you know enough about splicing, you know where we're going with this. I'm going to give myself a little bit of slack. And it's all bunched up right now. We don't care about that. And we're going to bury this tail down and inside. So we'll give it some slack right here. Jake, can you see that all right? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Whoops. And again, we're going down about 4 or 5 strands. And now we're going down inside. And we're going to run down the length. And the length of this tail is kind of important. You want it to be a good couple feet long. Different manufacturers have different recommendations about how long they want theirs to be. And if you're unsure, then consult the manufacturer. At this point, things can get a little tricky, especially if you haven't left enough of a belly here. And now I'm working with the tool inside of the rope by holding it here. There's a bump where the wire basket ends and the blue aluminum begins. That's a good spot to hold on to. So I'll grip that with my pinky and ring finger right here, and then I'll push the other end, push the slack onto the other end. And now I'm going to pinch down here and milk the slack up. And you'll see it suck in right there a little bit. And it just goes inch by inch. And at some point, right now I'm getting enough tension that I can't go any further. But then if I push this down, it gives me the slack that I need again. So we'll probably stop right about there. I think I've gone too far actually as I'm showing the technique. We bring the tip of the tool out. Oh, I think, okay, so I did go too far. This is a good example. And if I would have measured it, everything would have been fine. But I have some slack right here to work with. And so that's going to help me. I can just bunch that all up to closer to the eye. Get that tool out. There's the extra slack that I need. When I'm not talking about it, I don't go too far on accident. And so we don't have to waste this extra time right here. But this is a good one to show that if you do go too far, it's not a big deal. All right, so we got the tip of the tool out. We'll stop right. We'll take the blue, the fid off. And now, honestly, you can tuck that back in with the tape on there, but it's just so easy for me to put another taper. The splicer in me won't let me leave. Whoop, and the garbage goes in there. Some of it fell down. So all we need is a little bit of a taper there, not a ton of a taper. And then I'm going to milk this out, and we'll watch it all slide back in. Okay, and that is about all that we need to do. And Jake, swing around over here again to get that, see that belly. So that's about the amount of tension that I'm looking for. It actually moves when I push down on it. Now there's one thing we need to correct here. This section of the splice right here, it's all bunched up. It's not laid out the right way. So I'm just gonna milk it outward and try to get even tension on both sides, both legs of the splice as they're weaving down. It should kind of just you're just milking it out. That's all you're really trying to do. Now, if I had too much tension in here, I could have pulled the tail of the rope out a little more, and that's why I leave the eye larger. With this larger eye, I can pull in the extra tail here, and just making the eye 2 or 3 inches shorter will bring a significant percentage of this slack out. But the way this is, I think it's pretty much a perfect installation. And let's get our chafe sleeve, make sure it's nice and perfectly centered. And now, when the big winds blow, we can watch this tree move. The tension goes up and down, allowing the movement, but there when we need some support. And we'll tell the client that this is not a forever system. There's no such thing as a forever system. So they're going to need to call us again to come out and look at their tree. And one of the great things about cable inspections is that you're also there to look at the whole tree itself, and you can find other issues. Maybe the tree needs to be thinned out again or something like that. So this is one of those things that can be good for the tree, good for the homeowner, and good for the business owner. So we shall leave that one right there. Carson, do we have any? No questions yet. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let's talk about, right now we've done a straight one-line cable installation. It's totally possible that we might have to put multiple cables in the steel in the same tree, and this can work in 2 different ways. One of them is what I call the V formation, and that might be where we have a really strong anchor limb on one side and maybe 2 smaller limbs that are going outward. So we're going to have one cable coming from the anchor limb to each separate of the lower limbs that are maybe they're angling away from the tree, but we're not necessarily going to cable those 2 to each other. So you just have 2 cables. They're each installed as individual cables. Now, if we have a tri-dominant tree, and I totally just made that word up, but I'm sure you can figure that that's a tree that comes up and splits into 3 separate trunks. We could do a box style installation where we'll do one cable just like this one, and then one going around and then to the next limb, and then one going from limb number 2 over here to limb number 3. And that creates a box all the way around. We call that a box style. Then the other style is a hub and spoke, or I just call it a hub style, where nothing is going from limb to limb. We're going to have something floating in the middle, and with dynamic cable, you can use one side on the tree, and then one side just going to a steel ring. And that steel ring can have 3 or 4 or 5, however many cables coming off of it. It really helps if you make that system on the ground, have the ring with the 5 tails coming off of it, and then you go up into the tree. You're going to waste a lot of rope when you do that, because you might estimate that it's 20 feet to each direction. So let's give yourself 25 or 30 so you don't have to undo anything. But the time that you'll save starting with one ring in the middle that has all the tails is worth way more than the bit of rope that you'll throw away. Another thing to keep in mind, you can use the thimble rings. If you get a big one, those are great to use in the middle as the hub. You'll just put one leg of the dynamic cable around the thimble ring, and then put the other legs going in the opposite direction, perpendicular to the thimble ring, but it'll serve as a hub. Carson, you've got a question for us.
Yeah, hey Nick, a couple of questions on Facebook. Scott Ross wants to know, would you ever use a rubber shock absorber spliced into the line to absorb some of that shock?
Yeah, do I need to repeat that question, or everybody heard it? Okay, good. Yeah, absolutely. I don't personally use them. I know that this rope, even after a few years out in the sun, will retain some elasticity. There are some systems that sort of rely on those rubber shock absorbers, and if you're using the Cobra system, for example, I would definitely use it, especially if it's a tree with big loads where you expect, you know, if it's getting coastal breezes or any big winds, and you want to absorb that shock. Let's hear that next question.
Sherry Hines wants to know, how often would you inspect, and what's the inspection difference between like steel and synthetic, and at what point would you replace those systems?
That's a really good question. So this is a tough one because, hold on one second. A big giant bug on the cameraman. This is a tough question because clients sometimes can't be bothered to get their stuff inspected. So the answer is annually for both of them, regardless. And the decision on when it should be replaced is kind of dependent on the tree, what stage in the tree's life it was when you cabled it. Some steel cables can last a decade or more if you're installing it in a tree that isn't necessarily growing and putting on height anymore. The dynamic cables you can't leave out in the sun for decades. So I think of them as 5-year installations. We encourage our clients to get annual inspections. They don't always do that. In our company, we are just getting to the point now where we can call clients back and say, hey, it's been 2 or 3 years. You haven't called us. We'd like to set something up to come look at it. And if they don't follow through at that point, then we kind of take our hands off the reins and let the fates decide. Any other questions? No. Okay, it is time to do some steel cable, and I'm actually going to pull this guy out right now because it's just going to get in our way, or get in the cameraman's way. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to talk about 2 types of cable right now. There's EHS and common grade. Thank you. The common grade cable isn't really used that much these days. There are 2 advantages to it that I can see. One, it's really easy to work with, and it's cheap. It's cheap to work. It's cheap for the labor, and it's cheap to buy. And the splice doesn't require that much precision. If I show you how to do it once, and we're not even going to take the time to do it today. I was going to, but I think we can spend our time on better things. If I show you how to do it once in 30 seconds, you'll get the idea of how it works. But Nick Bonner's shaking his head saying it's way too hard and you would never get it again. But that's because he's not that good at this kind of stuff. So, so then that leads us to, oh, that's the common, we don't want the common stuff. That leads us to EHS. The EHS cable, extra high strength. If you look side by side on a chart on the strengths of EHS cable compared to common grade cable, it is almost double. Do you have a question, Nick Bonner? Can you use EHS as a zip line? You can. I don't know anything about zip line, so I'm not going to. Huh? Really? I'm not going to answer that one. Yeah. I don't know. Don't do it.
No?
Nope. I don't.
Certified Master Arborist Nick Araya says no.
Okay.
Where are we moving to?
Actually, we're going to stay right here for the moment. So in this little lovely book right here, if you haven't done cables, braces, and props before and you want to learn more, you should get this book very quickly and spend some time looking at it. It is created as a supplement to the A300 cable bracing standards created by the ANSI group. There are two things in here I want to really clarify. If you have the big A300 standards, they're basically more a list of rules. It doesn't really tell you how to do anything. This book has really good diagrams and a lot of charts that will give you ideas on the difference between a box system and when you should be using a certain type of material. Inside this book, I rely on it so much I even have it tagged. Carson, can you pull up? Oh no, never mind. You don't have this photo right here. There's a little chart right here that will, if I hold that still, we can compare the diameter of the limb over here, and it'll actually estimate the load for us and tell us what size common grade or what size extra high strength cable we should use. And if you look at it, go down the line here where you could be using 7/16 common grade, you can use 1/4 inch EHS. Wow, these gnats are crazy. So anyways, the book kind of demystifies a lot of it for you. In time, you'll learn that the book isn't always right. And as you look at trees better and you look at cable systems better, you see how trees react. You'll start deviating sometimes or just going off your gut. But it's good every once in a while to go back and do a little gut check and make sure that it is what you think it should be. All right, so let's show this guy right here. We've got to bust some cable off of here. And if I open this up, if you've ever unraveled a spool of EHS, it's extremely rigid. We good right there, Nick? Yeah. All right. It's extremely rigid, and it'll open up on you in a full straight line, 150 feet long. So we're going to drop it into one of these preformed baskets. Okay, here we go. All right, so we dropped that guy right there. And you can see the cable is already starting to come apart on us. And I'm gonna just do this quick and dirty here. We're not gonna be too precise with it. But fold that guy over, fold this one over, and just give it one twist. Then grab the other two, give it one twist. And then we can take them and kind of twist them into each other. All right, that's good enough for this demonstration purposes. And now I got to grab some wire snippers. I'm going to go ahead and put my glasses on for this part because sometimes the cable does screwy things. And notice we're a little bit crooked here. You can see the edge of the basket's really high here. Holy shit, dude. What the hell? Get out of here. We're good. Thought I was about to get attacked by a bear. Okay, we'll see if that'll work. All right, so we'll grab some snippers. Pardon my French. I hope that didn't offend any of you guys. And so I'm just going around and clipping the wires that were holding the original spool together. There's usually 3 or 4 of them in here. 2, 3, and 4. All right. Now at this point I like to give it a little bounce and it'll open up the spool a little. Okay, now we find the inside and now we can pull our cable, straight out. So the neat thing about EHS is that it'll open up for you pretty easily, and that's going to come in handy later, but for now we'll put it back together and leave it in one piece. Okay, so we'll leave that guy in here for the moment. Nope, we'll leave it laying out actually. And we're going to go and look at the 2 different types of termination systems. Hey Bonner, can you grab the rig guy wire stop over there? It's sitting on a piece of cable. Yeah, that guy, just chuck it over here. Okay, and of course I left my drill bit. Hang tight.
They said that I needed to get some bugs checked. The people on the internet get what the people on the internet want.
Yes, I don't blame, or I don't oppose it at all. Okay. Now, in our chart, and this part's going to be silly because you guys are going to look at me. Well, anyways, in the chart, in the BMP for cabling, we can find out that for these size limbs, we're going to use 1/4-inch cable. So to drill the holes for that, I'm going to use a 5/16 inch drill bit. We want to step it up just a little to make it easier to get the cable through the tree. Okay, so when you drill this hole, it's really essential that you stand down and look at the back of it and make sure that this cable is going to be lined up perfectly all the way through the installation. So I'm going to go right about here, and what I like to do is put my face right here and look down the line that way, because right now from here it looks like it's in the right spot. Then I look this way and find out that I'm off by about 15 or 20 degrees. So that's the angle that I want right about there. And I'm going to change the position just a little bit. All right. Okay, so we're going to show 2 different termination systems here, and in fact, so that's going to come through. I think it's getting jammed on a little crack inside there. There we go. So that's going to come through there, and the first one we're going to show is the wedge grip system. This one I think is faster, but it's not the one that I prefer. So we'll give it a... yeah, that's a good point, that most people buy the next system I'm going to show you. So I'll loosen this up here. When you buy it, it has an extra piece in there that it kind of is all ready for you, but this one was a used one, so we had to... Whoops. What's going on here? All right. Now I see what's going on, and this is part of the reason why I don't like it. One moment, I got to grab my grinder. Here's a little pro tip I'll show you. All of our battery-powered tools at Tree Care LA, they have a ring on it so that we can clip them, tie them up for the climbers. This is a little bent at the end, and it's making it harder to get the cable through.
People ask us all the time what the best way to cut cable is, and we sell, you know, some expensive shears and some other things like that. And grinder.
The grinder is the best way. There's no tool we found. When you're dealing with EHS, we haven't found anything that can do it, especially the 3/8 inch size. Okay, there we go. So we got it on, and you have to leave a tail, but not that much. But now we got it, well, we're gonna leave that much. And you just start tightening it down, and you'll feel it sort of stop right about there, and you just go a hair further. This system is a little tricky for me because I always wonder, like, how much further am I supposed to go, and what happens if we don't go far enough? This excess I could cut off, but for demonstration purposes, we're gonna leave that there. Let's head over to the other side, and we'll show the other termination system and see how that goes. Ooh. Okay. I think that'll do it right there. Okay, so just like before, we have to cut this cable, and I want to be clear that when we're doing this at work, we always cut the cable on the ground and send up the length to the climber. There are two ways we measure it. I'm sure a lot of folks know the technique where you kind of just have the rope and swing it over, and you'll tie a knot on the rope, and you can tell the ground guy cut it to the length of the tail of rope. My preferred method is to use my laser measurer, which is over on the table, so forget about it. But I can just laser from here over to there, and it'll tell me that it's 22.5 feet. That's the inside of the span. I know that the cable is going to stick out a foot on the backside, and the limb is about 6 inches. So if I said 22.5, I'm going to add a 1.5 feet over there, and that gives us 24 feet. And then on this side, another 1.5 feet is going to give us 25.5 feet. And then I can call down to the ground guys, cut me a 25.5 foot piece. Here we're going to eyeball it. So I'm just going to cut it to right about here. And the tricky part is remembering where that spot is. Yo, get in there, buddy. Okay, so that can stay over here. Okay, so now this is how it would actually be in the tree. We've done one side, and I have to bring this over with me, and I have to hold on to it. So on my harness, I have just a webbing strap that I can hold on to it. For today, I'm just gonna set it on the ground. And now I have to drill the hole. And this part really matters. We wanna get this nice and even. I look down, I think that's pretty good. So I'm gonna start drilling right here. Don't keep your face right here, because if this, well, hold on. Actually, you're good here, but sometimes it'll break on you. Let's speed it up a bit. I like to go through a couple times to sort of ream the hole out a little. Okay, so that should take care of that. Whoop, we're losing hardware here. Okay, this guy goes through the tree. Okay, and that should give us plenty of room over there. All right, and we'll leave that sit for a moment, and I will show you. This is the Tree Care LA cabling bag. hard steel cabling bag, and we've got a few different pockets in here. This front big one right here, that holds 3 different pairs of pliers. These cutters are the best ones I've found. They're the Nipex. The model number, if you want it, is 7122200. And we buy them on Amazon, and they'll last us about a year. And we like the beveled head on it. The angled head, excuse me, is really good. And then the other 2 pliers, I'll show you how we use them. This little pocket down here is where we put the rig guy hardware into. And down in the bottom, we also keep one of these beveled washers. They don't always get used, but we always have them jammed down at the bottom in case we need it. And then inside here, we have the come-along system. We'll show you in a second. And of course, it has a strap to connect it to the tree. Usually there's a branch right here. Let me see if this will hold. Yeah, this might not hold here, but sometimes if we do a couple twists on it. Okay, that'll do it. That'll hold it. Okay, so at this point, I need to put some tension on it, and then we'll do the termination at the end. We need a come along, and this is gonna go around. We gotta cinch this whoopee sling up quite a bit. Oh, that's a little too short. And, whoo, buddy. Okay, so that goes there. And we have the carabiners are color coded. The green carabiner goes to the tree, it stays on the whoopee. And then on this guy here, we have a gray carabiner, and that's what's gonna go onto the cable using the Haven's grip or Klein grip. I can't remember which one this is, but either way, this is our new one. It's really fancy schmancy. But first I want to show you our come along. It's super tiny fiddle block setup. The rope is a 1/4 inch, but it's this stuff made by Yale Cordage. It's called PhD. So you can say you got a PhD from Yale, I guess is their little joke. It's super fuzzy, and it gives you a ton of grip. Trying to hold on to a rope this small is almost impossible when you have to put a good load on it. But the fuzzy nature of it makes it basically easy to do. So I'm going to try to do this simulating if I were actually tied into the tree. We stretch this out, not all the way. Ideally I would stretch it out all the way and come over here, but it can be hard to get this far when you're tied in over there. So I'm going to keep my feet anchored over here and just reach out as far as I can. Wow, these ones are different than the other ones we had. Oh, there we go. Grip that guy upward. And that's going to go on there. And we kind of reach it out as far as we can and then flip that little guy down so that keeps it on the cable. And then we just get a little bit of tension on it. We're not yanking it just yet. We're tied into a dead tree over there, so it might not cooperate with us. So it has a lock on here, so I can let go and it's going to hold the progress that I've made. And now we can take our hardware, which I have to harvest off of this piece of cable first. And you guys can't hear it, but there's an ice cream truck off in the distance, and that sure sounds good right about now. Okay, so the rig eye system consists of 2 components, the nut and the cone. The inside of the nut has a tapered channel, and the cone matches with it. The first thing you do is slide the nut on, and then use your hands, and if you don't have the muscle power for it, those teeth right there are the perfect size to lightly grip it and give it a little bit of a twist, and it'll start to come apart on you. And when you start to spin it, it'll open up nice and easy for you, and you want that to open up. Now, there are 7 strands here. 6 of them are on the outside, and then this guy right here is the middle strand. And if you look at it compared to all the other ones have a wave to it, and this one doesn't. It's straight. And that's where the cone goes. And then what I don't know why I always do it this way, but this is the way I do it, is I'll grab that little one, and I'll put a little bit of tension on it just so we can't lose the cone. Just a little bit. And now I tension the whole system. And pull as tight as we can get it. All right, we'll go right about there. Oh, I hear cracking on the dead tree, so we'll stop there. All right, so yeah, we'll go with that. So from this point, we're gonna unravel it and make sure everything is unraveled evenly. When you're installing, this is actually a good place where I should have put that beveled washer. If you look right here, there's an angled gap right there. There should have been the beveled washer underneath there. We also have to address some of the group questions about where do we put this cable. This is a good point, and I have a feeling you might want to know this later. We could go down or up. We could have installed it here or here or here or here. Why did I pick this spot? And it is important to visualize your system. If you have 2 stems, and for the sake of our demonstration, the stems will be parallel to each other or like equidistant, nice even angle with a perpendicular trunk. If your stems are coming up, we know that we want the cable to be perpendicular to, we want the cable to be basically parallel to the ground if those stems are mostly upright. But sometimes you're doing a vertical stem and an angled limb, and you don't want a horizontal cable at that point. What we do at that point is we imagine our angle, visualize that angle, and now imagine a line right down the middle. We call that line the bisect, and the cable that you install right about here is our limb, here's our bisect. The cable should be perpendicular to that bisect. So on that example that I'm kind of showing here, our cable would come at a slight downward angle because the bisect is right about here and the actual limb is right about here. So we'll have a little bit of a downward angle on that sort of a setup. Okay. So here's a little trick that I kind of came up with, and I think it's phenomenal. And if you love it, hit that like button. No. If you love it, hit the heart button so you can see, so I know how much you love it. We want this to be in pretty good. We have to seat that cone as far down as possible. It doesn't always go as far as you want. So if you take these needle nose pliers and slide it on there, and then take these bigger pliers and use it like a little hammer, you can actually work the whole system further down. I got a little bit of slack still, and so now I can work that thing down and in there. So we, at this point, can proceed. In a moment, we'll talk about the price difference of some of the systems, and then we'll talk about why we should even bother cabling trees in the first place. So here, we're going to start snipping strands. Let me get my glasses back on. And I'm using these Nipex, and on the 6 outer strands, we can cut them pretty short, just a couple millimeters shy, a couple millimeters extending beyond the rig eye, right about here. This middle strand right here is really important. It's the heart of the whole system. We're going to bend it over. On the bigger ropes, the bigger cables, you got to do that with a pair of pliers, and then we'll snip it off right about there. And that that can conclude this. We're done with this side now. We'll take the, well, let's go ahead and do that now. Jake, if you swing around to this side, I think you'll see this part well. I'm going to pop this, and the cable should go taut at that point, so we can get our rope back into the system and take this guy off, take that guy off, put all this back into the bag and send the bag down, and then we're good to go. So that's the rig guy system, and now we've got some tension under here. In a real tree, that's a dead tree in the end. If this was a real limb, when we pull it with the come along, you'll really feel it come together, and then at the end you'll have even more tension here. The rig guy system, if you look at this one, in fact, you can see that it angled downward a little. That tells me we should have put that beveled washer in there. It's kind of at a slight downward angle. It's not bad, but it could have been better. So let's answer some questions, but before we do that, let's try this. If you think that the wedge grip system that we installed on the dead tree over there is better, hit the like button. And if you think the rig guy system is better, then hit the love button. And we'll see what everyone else is thinking. So I think this, Jake, if you're ready to walk with me, we're heading over to another tree. We're going to talk about why we should bother cabling trees at all. I need to bring these two guys right here and these glasses, and I think that's it. So we as arborists have to make the decisions on when those, oh, I think I just disconnected something. You guys still got me over there on the sound?
1 hour in.
Okay, cool. We have to make decisions on if we are going to install a support system, where do we put it, what do we use, and all that kind of stuff. We've talked a little bit about, let me go over here, Jake, and then we've talked a little bit about the dynamic cable. There are times when we're going to install a steel system in our company, and for us it's a very easy separation. Dynamic, we want movement. In steel cable systems, we want that steel to be holding the full weight of the tree at all times. Maybe it means we can see a little bit of separation in the union. Maybe we think that there's so much of a load that for whatever reason we can't alleviate by pruning. Maybe it's because of the health of the tree doesn't allow for heavy thinning or end weight reduction. Maybe the client doesn't want the tree to be made smaller or thinner for whatever reason. Those are times when we'll look at steel cable to be the support for the tree rather than, yeah, we're heading over there next, Nick. So there are a few indicators for me that I can see sometimes from a mile away that tell me this tree is probably going to need a cable of some sort. So we can move this way, Jake. That's no problem. First and foremost, when you see a codominant tree, and Carson, can you go ahead and put up that picture of the pine tree? When you see a codominant tree, that doesn't tell you that it needs a cable, but it is telling you that you need to go over there and look at it. You want to look at the weight. How is the weight distributed along those codominant stems? And then where they come down together, what does that union look like? If you have a nice wide U-shaped union, and you know that thing, and I'm not going to say what I've heard it be called, but where the wood comes together and it squishes out the sides. Some people call it elephant ears. That would be a good PC term to call it. When it's doing that, that's an indication that maybe it does need a cable. When it's a really tight V union, that's an indication that it does need a cable, or probably needs a cable. And then, is the pine tree picture up now? Yeah, okay. If you look at this picture of a pine, it's codominant, it's kind of leaning out over the street, but the craziest thing about it is the canopy is separating, and there's a big gap between one side and the other side of the canopy. Now, we know that trees will naturally grow to fill in an opportunity for sunlight, and canopy separation is natural. We see it in the forest all the time, but what happens is as limbs grow further apart, the leaves in that gap will recognize that there's much more sunlight coming in, and they'll fill in that area. So we as humans looking at the ground would never notice a gap in the canopy. But on this pine tree, yeah, we're going to be working from here. We'll be working all from this side, yeah. On this pine tree, and I see this all over, not always, but I see it a lot, it's spread so wide so fast that the canopy can't even fill in the gap. And that tree in that photo, you can tell it needs a cable. Unfortunately, the laws in Los Angeles don't allow the cabling of parkway trees, and that's a whole different topic we'll get into later, or we can talk about it after hours. So let's turn and look at this mulberry right here. This is an amazing little guy, and not particularly huge, but this is a really good example of something you might find in the urban environment and a residential home. And it's a good beginner tree for arborists who want to do this kind of work, but they don't want to buy a drill bit that's 5 feet long and costs $300. They don't want to take the liability of cabling a 120-foot tall walnut tree that's over a 200-year-old house or something like that. So a little tree like this, it's probably about 35 feet tall. And we can see some very clear weaknesses in the tree, some defects. Let me grab, okay, I guess we'll use this hammer right here. I can stick this thing down inside there and see that it goes in quite a ways. A lot of you guys are probably thinking, this is a removal. Oh my God, I would never let a client keep this tree. But the wood around here is a little bit hollow there, but all along the back of the tree, and Jake, go ahead and swing around the side here. You can see that there's a little bit of a deformation right here, but this is much better on this side, and the hollowness doesn't go all the way through. And this is a really good example of something that I don't think I would be comfortable telling a client, yeah, there's a defect, but it's fine. I also don't think I need to tell a client to cut this tree down because of this defect. So this is a perfect situation where we would recommend some actions be taken. So what are we going to do? It's codominant. There's a failure at the union, and it's big enough to justify it. So we would put a steel cable up there. We're not going to do that right now because we've already talked about steel cable. But we're also going to go ahead and put some braces right here. Carson, are you disconnected? Oh, we're going to show the cable, the diagram of the BMP again. And I use this one so much, I got a little flag right there to help me remember. And this chart right here, Carson will show it up in a second here. Can you see it all right? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Right here, it tells us what's the diameter below the junction. And we can look on this chart and it tells us what size threaded rod we should use and how many of them we should use. So let's step back for a moment here. We're going to all go through this together. Carson, let me know when you got that diagram up. Okay, awesome. And is it split screen so they could see me and the picture? Negative. Okay, all right. So I'm wrapping a DBH tape around this tree below the union, and we're coming up with about 16 inches diameter, approximately. So on your chart, you're looking down the left, it says diameter below the junction, 14 to 20 inches. That would be 16, so we're going to go with 5/8. And this is a really good example where I'm going to deviate from that, because normally a tree with a union this big would have much more, a much bigger canopy and a much larger load. But this tree is growing underneath a cottonwood over there, so there isn't as much load here. I can save the client a little bit of money and make it easier on my crew if we downgrade the system one level. So we're going to go with the 1/2 inch, and either way, whichever level we went with, it would tell us to do 2 bolts. So now we have to make the decision, where are those 2 bolts going to go? And looking for my drill bit for this. Where the heck did I put it? Oh boy, this is awesome. We might have to go straight to the big one. Okay, no worries. I'll be right back. Let me grab something over here. Da, 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 da. Okay, so let me grab a couple of tools here. We'll grab this marker right here. Yellow might show up better. Now, let's pretend for a moment that there isn't a huge cavity in the tree right here, and then it was just a normal union. One of the cables, regardless of what's going on down here, one of the braces, excuse me, needs to be above the union, above the base of the union. So one of them would end up going right about here. Right about there is where one of them would go. And then the next one, we're going to go at least one trunk diameter. We measured that at 16 inches, so we could take the measuring tape and go down 16 inches-ish, and that would put us right about here. That's where it should go. We'll put this yellow one right here. And Jake, how's that showing right there? You can see that all right? Okay. So that's where the other rod would go. However, the formation of this actual tree, where it's open right here and then it pinches together, there's really good contact there. I think I'm going to rely on that. And so what we'll do here is put one of them here for sure, right about there. And now we're going to bump this one up because that was supposed to be 16 inches-ish. So we'll go up about 16 inches, which puts it right about, oh, there's a little mark right there already. I don't know where that came from, but so right about here is where that cable would, that brace would go. And let's do it this way. The one that's red and yellow, so we can visualize. The one that's red and yellow, that's where it would be. That's our system right there. Now, when I'm visualizing this on a client's property, what diameter cable is that? Drill bit? 13/16? Bring it on over. That's the one we're looking for. Thank you, Karina. When I am, I'll take it. Thank you. Whew. Oh no, that's too big. That's too big. That's all right. Don't worry about it. When I'm doing this at a client's property, I'm not actually going to mark up their tree like this because they don't want to see that. It looks kind of messy. So I'll put little marks like this that it can just help me visualize it. And then at the end, I'll even scratch those off a little. Whoa, something like that. Just so they're not, coming out and going, oh my God, what did you do? It looks like Burning Man out here or something like that. I don't know. Some sort of big art project. So this is where we'd put one of them here and then one of them here. And that would be really good. And I think that I would go ahead and put, what do you guys think? If you've done bracing before, hit the like button if you think you would go ahead and put another one down here. I don't think it's a bad idea, but one thing you have to be careful with, when you start putting in threaded rod, you're using mechanical advantage here, and you can create a lot of power, and you could actually bring this back in together, which could actually create stress here and actually cause this part to move outward. So I think if I did put one down here, I would get it hand tight. I would do a few turns with the wrench to tighten it up a little bit, and I would stop right there. I wouldn't want to see a lot of movement on the inside here. So what we're going to do, we do have all the parts that we need on the next tree, and it's a gigantic tree. So we'll head over there right now. We'll need the BMP book, and we'll take this stuff too. And we're going to go, hold on, let me see if I can carry everything. Need a ground guy here, huh? Okay, we're going to head over to the honey locust. Okay, so we've got a beautiful patient right here that needs to be worked on. And this is a type of tree. When I see trees like that mulberry, I'm like, all right, this is pretty standard. It's a nice tree. It looks nice. It gives them some shade. The smaller trees I don't get quite as excited for. But this is a tree that I do get excited for. It's more like an 80-foot tall tree. It's a honey locust, and definitely not the non-thorned version of it. Excuse me? We're going to be drilling right here, all the way through here. Ooh, good. The sun's shining right on us to light it up nice and bright. So let's look at this tree here. What are we looking at? It's definitely codominant in form. And let me get the awesome laser pointer. Jake, can you get way up there with the camera? So we would probably be putting a cable in. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Somewhere right around there or higher. And I'd have to get a lot further back. You can bring it back down now, Jake. I'd have to get further back to see exactly where the cable is going to go. That part's not important right now. What we want to look at is the base of the tree, the trunk of the tree, where this union comes together. Right along here, I like to use the language that this is a seam. If you say crack, it sounds scary, and it sounds like you're trying to make the client do something that that maybe they shouldn't even be getting involved with. But really what it is a seam, and it's a place where two planes of wood, two growths of wood are coming together. This bump right here is telling us that the wood is hitting itself in the middle, and it's not locking together the way we want it to, and that's how we know that this is a defect. It's coming together and then pushing outward, and that's what this big bump is. So when I see a union that tight, a V crotch, and you got the camera, can you see that in the frame right now? Mm-hmm. Right here, this is a tight V crotch shape, and I can follow that seam downward. That tells me this tree is going to need at the very least a cable, and then depending on my understanding of how good the wood is of this particular species, and you'll know that better in your area than I ever would, that's how I'll make the decision on whether or not it's also going to get a brace. We're going to follow around, as all arborists should do, and see what's going on in the back of the tree, and I'll also take a mallet because I want to hear. That sounds a little bit hollow there. So let's follow our way this way, and you're going to see as we get further back, there's a big hollow right here, and I could drop that mallet all the way in there. It's big enough to get the head of the mallet down and in there. So we can follow that seam all the way down, and it goes well below where we're standing right here. So this becomes almost crucial that if there were structures around here, if there was some sort of a risk that could, bad things that could happen, negative consequences if there were a failure, we definitely would want to act on that. And a lot of people, your average tree guy is going to respond by recommending a removal. That's the big money option. And yeah, you can see that seam is open here as well. It's open all the way up. It's not properly connected. So what I want to do is show what it takes to drill. This is a decent sized hole here. I want to show what it takes to drill a hole for a 3/4 inch. Oh, I just blew it. We're going to look at the book and see what size it should be, but let's do all that together. Let's go through the motions. We'll grab the DBH tape, and all right, that one goes right about there. So below the union, we're at about approximately 30 inches. So we'll just call it 30 for the fun of it, for math's sake. And I'm going to look at my chart here, and it tells me for 30 inches, that's somewhere between 20 and 40. It's recommending that we do 3 of them plus one more for every 8 inches above 30. But we're not above 30, we're basically right at 30. So we're gonna be installing a 3/4 inch, and we would be installing 3 of them. But for the demonstration, we'll just be installing the bottom one. And now we have to make that decision on where they're gonna go. Jake, I think, can you get back that far to see from the union all the way basically down to the ground? Can you see everything from right there? Yeah. Okay, good. So we know that one of them is going to go above the union. The union's right there, so we'd probably go right about here with it. So you'll just have to visualize that one because I can't quite reach. And the bottom one, for me, I want the bottom one to be at the bottom of the defect or a little bit higher. Now, to me, I think I can see that going all the way down to ground level. So that would put it, you know, I'd probably be somewhere about right here with it. So we can go ahead and put the bottom one's going to go right there. I'm not sure if you can see that from that far away. And then that puts the middle one, unless the tree is giving me a reason to deviate from this, what I do is take the top and the bottom and just split the difference. And that puts it right about here, somewhere right about there. That's what I'd be looking for here. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. And in order to do that, we need a really long drill bit. It's about 30 inches. You can't just take an 18-inch drill bit and drill through this way 18 inches and then come out and then come through here, right? We can't do that because if it's not perfect, which it almost basically never will be, you'll have some big problems. Oh, I think they're telling me I lost them on the mic. Let's see. Is that better, guys? Oh, now I can hear you. The volume was down. Aha. Okay, we got a question from the field. Let's hear it. Yep. Okay, really good. Two really good questions. One, I'll repeat them for everyone. How essential is a rod when you already have a cable up in the tree? And then the next question we'll hit after this. I make that decision based on the union down here. If I've made the decision it needs a cable, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will need a rod down below. What I'm looking for is how good is this down here. And on this particular tree, we have a lot of swelling that seems good right here, but that seam continues down all the way to the base of the tree. And then we saw the decay on the backside going inside the tree. So this is a situation where I would definitely, this isn't for demonstration purposes, this would be a tree that I would recommend to have a through rod. The rod is not essential. The rod is definitely not essential on every situation where you need a cable overhead. But, you know, so base it on the quality of the wood down below. At the place where you're installing the rod, is it all good all around? If it's all good, you probably don't need a rod there. And then the other question that I heard was, is it reasonable to use a rod if you're also installing a dynamic cable? And the answer is probably good enough. And steel here. Some full tension. I think we can hop right to it, and to make the demonstration a little more obvious, I want to show something. We're going to do this with a way long. we need to use, and that would be 13 of an inch. These drill bits are expensive. This is a 60 incher. I think it's $300. For something that you're going to buy and it's just going to sit there. So not only make so let's go, let's hop this bit, and we have a cap on it, so I can go ahead and set it in the dirt there. What's going on here? Oh. Okay. When you put these big bits on, you definitely 5-foot hole. Start drilling, the hole tends to wobble on you. So what I like to do, for 2 reasons. Guys, I'm just going to keep going. You let me know if we need to do anything different. It doesn't seem that bad. Okay. All right, all right. You got me now, though? Yes. All right. So if you've been gone for a couple minutes, it started raining all of a sudden, which I don't mind because it's crazy hot out here, and we're talking about drill bits. If you have a 4 or 5 foot long drill bit that's really expensive, you want to do whatever you can to spare that bit, make it last as long as you can. So what I'm going to do is start by drilling most of the hole with I think this might be a 3-footer right here, and I know it's going to go right about here. So normally when I'm doing this in a work environment, Jake, can you verify the camera's still on me right here?
Yes.
Yeah, we're good? Okay. So normally what I would do is have one guy holding this and then someone else walking around the tree and telling me to raise it, lower it, left or right. I'm just going to have to eyeball it here. And you can help by holding and stepping outward. And now we start drilling. There's a lot more torque when you're drilling larger diameter holes. And normally I have that extra handle right here. I didn't bring it with me, so we'll just cross our fingers. Now, one thing I want to point out is that we're drilling into living wood, and that's something that the people that designed these drill bits weren't really expecting. One of the tricks we found, oh, it's over here, is that if you take some veggie oil and lube the bit with it, you'll get more resistance. Woo! All right, where'd that bottle go? All right, so we're on this camera over here now, and I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit of lube on here. Come on, buddy. Whoop. I'm gonna drill that hole a little bigger. And I'm using the NV Earth veggie-based bar oil. And just put some on each along the flutes here. It's a good good oil to use because it's got tackifiers in it and holds it on. All right. I'm getting some resistance right now because there is a wall inside here. The decay is, inside the decayed area, one of Shigo's wall is being built up inside there. So I'm gonna have to lean into it. Okay, so you saw it fly in at a point, and that's because we've entered into that decay area. And now that's the other end right there. Okay. All right, we can go ahead and pull that out. And now we're gonna take this drill bit off and step it up to the big guy. And that pre-drilled hole is gonna serve two really important purposes for us. One, it's gonna support the end weight of this drill bit so that it's nice and steady, and we don't have to fight the gravity, fight the centripetal force or whatever, whichever one that's called. And then two, it's gonna, we put a lot of wear onto a much cheaper drill bit. That drill bit's about $50. This one's $200 or $300. Ooh, there we go. Now we're flowing. So it's gonna save our bottom line, and we can use this as little as possible. Okay, I think we can leave that. Bam. All right, and go a little bit more oil. And now we're gonna get through this thing. Okay, so one of the things I want to point out is that a lot of times people are concerned about what tools you need to actually drill a hole. We've drilled up to 6-foot length holes with this drill bit. It's a Milwaukee M28 series. We've done 5-footers with the DeWalt 20 volt, what do they call it? 20V Max is the name of that system. And this one is noticeably better, the M28s, but the 20V Max was sufficient to do a 5-foot hole. You don't need an extension cord running out there, and you don't need the big giant gas-powered drills. If you have this guy, it's gonna come in real handy for a lot of things when you're doing tree work, up in trees, and you need some power. Okay, so we'll set that guy there. Okay, cool. So how are we doing on time? We got 30 minutes left?
We're an hour and a half in. We can go for another 30 to 60.
Okay, awesome. We're doing great. Okay, so we have this lovely piece of rod here. It's the 3/4 inch. This one's 60 inches long, which is way longer than what we need, but that's all right. So what we're gonna do is start on that side. We'll finish over here. Let's grab some hardware.
Obviously, you don't want to do this when you hear thunder.
Yeah, never, ever when you hear thunder. Oh, we're in the wrong. Hold on, guys. I got to get my hardware here. There it is. Okay, we need some washers and a bolt. Oh, that's crazy. Okay, that's fine. So we're going to slide a washer on here. Thread this guy on just a little bit. I'm leaving about a 1/2 inch sticking out the backside, and then jam it down. Now, I like this to sit a little more flush on the tree. So what I'm actually going to do is chisel out. We're not going to do it fully today, but I mark this with a chisel. You guys all are carrying a chisel in your pocket, right? And we can actually pull this out of the way. And I would chisel just a little bit. I'm not going crazy, not cutting down into the, well, we'll go ahead and do it. We're almost there. We're not cutting all the way down to the cambium, but I just do want that washer to sit nice and flush. Yep. There, that's better. So that would get slid on nice and good, and we don't really have to do anything with that part there. All right, so now safety glasses. Now we got to get this nut all the way down here, and we could sit here stupidly and thread this thing all the way, but we've got to cut through here anyways. So I'm going to show you a way to cut through here and still be able to get the nut and washer on. Ooh, thorns. Let's get this out of the way. And all right, so the nut and washer are going to come out to about here, so I'm going to cut it right about there. And we might have to swap out the disc. Let's see if I can get through this with Yep, sorry guys, you're gonna have to watch me swap out the disc. One moment, commercial break or whatever. Enjoy the sound of the crickets. Woohoo, running over to the tool bag. Nope, I got it. Oh good, I won't say any profanities. And there's the disc right there. Okay. Okay, it sounds like the audio cut out when I was explaining whether it made sense to use a rod when installing dynamic cable. And the answer, in my opinion, is a resounding no. And I'll tell you why. Whenever I'm looking at a tree to determine if it's fit for a cable, I always ask myself first, whoop, we gotta go that way, if we can do dynamic cable there. I always want to use dynamic cable if that's an option. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. In order for it to receive dynamic cable, whoops, it needs to fit two criteria. One, it needs to be a tree that we want to encourage movement on so that it can continue building its own strength. Usually that means it's a younger age tree, like a mid, maybe a 30-year-old tree instead of a 90-year-old tree. And then two, it appears to be free of defects at the bottom, or at least only has minor defects. And if it meets those two criteria, then I go with the dynamic cable. So by default, if I need to put a steel rod in here to correct a defect, we're still good on the audio? Okay. If I need to install a steel rod to correct a defect or to address a defect at the base of the tree, that tells me that we've ruled dynamic cable out as an option. So there are some folks that use dynamic cable in a static configuration, under load and full tension all the time. And I don't do that just because I think we run a much greater chance, and I've seen girdling happen much quicker when dynamic is installed under tension. So if it's in tension all the time, it's a steel cable up top. And if there's a defect down below, that means we're probably putting steel here and up top. Sound good, Carson? Oh! Battery. I thought the battery died. We're almost there. what's going on here? Oh, I know what's going on. Okay, so we got it cut. Now, if you've ever, oh no, where'd I put the nut? I think it's in my pocket. Oh, here it is. Awesome. So there's something silly going on. I can't find the other washer, so we're gonna use this the little disc wheel to simulate our washer. If you've ever cut through threaded rod before, you know that the threads usually get jacked up and you can't get this thing to go on there. One of our climbers pointed out to me that if you, Oscar Sanchez, by the way, if you're watching, you get credit for this one. He taught me this. If you thread this on ahead of time and then cut through it, when you thread it off, the nut will correct the threads on the bolt. It'll reform them. And then eventually we figured out if you take a hand file, you can round this off and that'll take off the deformed metal, and then you can thread this on. And then eventually I found, stay where you are, Jake, I found this guy right here. It's called Uniburr, and they do sell them on Amazon. Made in America. And what it is a little drill bit that will go around the outside and shave off just a little of that threaded rod. So let's go ahead and do that. It will do up to 3/4 inch, so I think we're pushing the limits here. And all we want to do, oh, you know, we gotta hold on to that. Usually you can hand hold it. That might be enough. It doesn't take much to make it so that we can thread that nut on. Yeah, that's all it takes, just a little bit. And now we can start tightening this down. It's gonna get a little chunky right there. Okay.
Does the heat from the
It's burning my hands right now.
does the heat from the cut also help rethread as well?
I don't think we're getting it hot enough for that to help at all. I don't think. Okay, so now we've got a couple options. Oh, there's the other nut. We have a couple options on how we can tighten this guy down. Channel locks do just fine, and you just sort of hold it. You might use 2 pairs of pliers to do that. One to hold the rod and one to work the nut. I found these. Oh, this might work. And I think we need this size. Oh no, we might not have a big enough size. We're gonna have to do it the old school way. Shoot. Anyways, what I was gonna show you is that I found these guys right here. Apparently it only works with the smaller diameter rods, but it'll let the ratchet slide down onto the rod with the nut, which is really super duper helpful. But I didn't check to make sure that it'll work with this size. So we'll do it with the, ooh, don't drop it. All right, so we'll do this with the, hey, can one of you guys get me a pair of pliers from the other cabling bag? The cabling bag over by station 1, it's still tied to the tree. Okay. And I'm just using my hand as the ratchet until the big muscle comes in. Now you can already see that I cut the rod too long, but it's no big deal. It's an easy fix. And I want the big yellow ones, please. Thank you. All right. Oh, you guys should all click the heart button. That was Karina that handed me the the hardware here. Saving the day as usual. That's her job at Tree Care LA. So now we can crank this thing down, and I think, there we go. Wasn't quite, the metal is a little bit deformed because it went through this area, And so it's not threading by hand the way that it should. There we go. There we go, almost there. Now we can go with this guy here. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. You didn't see that.
Righty tighty, lefty loosey.
Is that how that goes? There we go.
Just a refresher.
Say that question again. Perfect. They're giving me the 15-minute warning. Okay. And, all right, we're cinching down. I can feel it clamping down. You can actually see the our washer getting deformed in here. And grab that there. Now, I can't tell you how many PSI or how far we should torque this down. What I know is I go hand tight first, which is right about there. And at that point, we usually have one guy tightening it while someone else is watching the union and seeing if you see anything happen. And we're watching for two things. Do you see it coming together at the point of the rod right here at this level? Or do you see anything above or below where it's starting to bow outward? And that means we're creating too much inward pressure right here. If we don't, and then the other thing we're looking for is, do we notice deformity happening around here? Is the bolt starting, is the nut starting to cut into the wood, or the washer cutting into the wood? And then that's an indicator that we're going too far. We're dealing with living things here. It's hard to say how far we have to tighten it, because if you're putting this in, honey locust is pretty hard wood, then you can tighten it down a little tighter. If you're putting it in tulip poplar, for example, or a tulip tree, as some people would adamantly call it. So I'm gonna go right about there, and that's where I'll call it. So to finish this off, we wouldn't leave it this long. A, it looks dumb. It's a liability if somebody bonks their head on it. So we would cut it off right there. And then we have to lock this nut right down. We don't want to walk away from it at this point. And there are 2 or 3 different ways we can go about doing that. The first way, which I personally don't like, is before we tightened it up all the way, we could have dropped some thread locker on there. We're leaving this out in nature. It has to freeze and thaw and be out here forever, basically. So I don't know what that thread locker looks like 20 years later. So what I tend to do is deform the threads, which you can do simply by taking some pliers and then just going like that. And all I've done, you can't really see it. You could just hit it with the end of a screwdriver and just hit it like that. You're just bending one of those threads in so that if this does start to back out, it'll get jammed on that tweaked thread right there. So that's my favorite way to do it. Some people will put a lock nut over the top of this. That's fine too. I like it to be as low profile as possible. And then the other one that I've seen, and I think this is getting a little carried away, but to each his own, is you drill a hole through the rod and then put a little piece of wire through there and make a loop on the end. And that serves as a stopper, like a stopper knot basically, to keep the nut from coming undone or whatever. So that's basically the procedure. Live and full time, you guys can see what it takes to drill a hole. There's some warnings I want to give you. You saw where we talked about putting that cable several feet over, or the bolt several feet overhead. If you have to do that on a ladder, it's extremely challenging. You'll probably be tied into the tree and standing out here with the drill bit. After a foot, you have to come down and move the ladder in closer. The ladder doesn't take kindly to outward pressure, and you're pushing in and the ladder's pushing out. So it takes a really long time to drill holes when you're standing on a ladder. You have to charge a lot of money. This one probably, we could go back and look at the clock. It probably took me 5 minutes or maybe even 10 minutes to drill all the way through. It could take an hour to drill through a 60-inch hole if you're working 10 or 20 feet up in the air. It does help to put a lanyard on so you can cinch it down and kind of get some opposing forces to do it. But either way, it goes really slow, and it isn't something that you want a full crew standing around watching you doing while they're all getting paid by the hour. And it really hurts. It might be a good weekend job for the owner to do by themselves when they're experimenting and refining the process for their own personal company, until you get the procedure down and you can show your employees exactly how you want it to be done in your company. So let's check the backside one more time just to make sure we're good. We don't want to walk away from it without doing that. And so I can see here that it's sticking out just a little more, or the thread is actually back in a little more than I would want it to be. So we'll go just a hair lighter, and then we'd have to have somebody hold it. We'll just leave it there, that's fine. Okay, we're gonna head over now to our next tree, and we're gonna look at propping, and that'll wrap it up. So I'm gonna take this hardware because we might need it over there. All right, cool. We need this one, and I think this guy right here, and this one there. I think this is everything we're gonna need. Okay. Yes. Okay, I'm going to warn you guys right now. If you're on the clock, we're going to go a little bit long. It'll be tight. We'll go a little bit long, but not crazy. So let's talk about propping. This is the best example we could find on our studio lot here. Props go on two different types of trees. One will be horizontal pieces of trees. So that could be a trunk that goes up and over, and it has a lot of weight on the end, and maybe the base isn't as strong as you would like it to be. Sometimes you can actually see the beginning of heaving on the backside, and the client isn't ready to cut the tree down, and so now we have to add a lot of support. The other place we use it is on a vertical tree, but it has a long horizontal limb. Oaks are notorious for this, and I mean that in an endearing way. We love that 20-foot tall limb that goes out sometimes 60 feet, provides a ton of shade. That one limb alone could weigh a few thousand pounds, and you start to see some stress over here, and you don't feel comfortable with them having a swing set hanging off of the limb. And that's where we want to, if we can't cable it to support it, then that's where we talk about propping. Propping has been around for ages, and the biggest thing I want people to think about doing differently is how we affix the prop to the limb itself. The most common technique that we see worldwide, and you can go in parks all around the world and see this, is what I call the cradle. And that's a post of some sort with a U-shaped thing of some sort, and it's holding on to the tree right here, and it looks perfect. It seems to be the best way to install it on the day you do the installation. But if you come back a decade or 20 years later, and I'm not that old of a guy, so I don't get to see 20-year-old installations that I've personally done, but I can see other installs that have been in there 20 or 30 years later. There's a lot of deformation around the cradle. The cradle is actually causing girdling to happen and creating a structural weakness in the tree. There are limbs that have failed at the point of the cradle, which is the exact opposite of what we want to do. So what I'm going to show you today is a way to avoid the cradle, but still give the tree plenty of time to grow. We're going to do a wooden prop, and this is something you can make in the field. It doesn't need to be super duper fancy. Hey, I'm going to pull this thing off because it's telling me that the battery is dead. So, well, we'll just leave it. So we're going to use a 4x4, And in our company, if we're building a wooden prop, we do it with two different things. Either a wooden 4x4 or just an old limb. Yeah, we got to turn this off. It keeps telling me, please change battery. I think that's this guy right here.
Please change battery.
Okay, there we go. So for us, wooden props are made out of one of two things. Either a 4x4 or we call it a natural prop, where it's an old limb that we've shared. Sometimes clients don't want things to look rigid, and we will use a cradle for that. It's usually a low stakes situation, and it's usually a Y-shaped, and there's very little contact. And I know that that cradle isn't going to be there for 30 years. The wood is going to decay a lot sooner than that. A lot of times I think of wooden props as training wheels, like the training prop, for a client to know if they're cool with having this thing in their front yard, kind of disturbing the visual feng shui that they had going on out there. And if they write out a piece of wood for a decade, it starts to decay at the base. That's when we can come in and say, listen, this is a good idea. It was installed well. It needs to be metal so that it will last, longer than you and I will be around. Would be ideal. And so then it'll get replaced. So let's start out here with the wood. I recommend pressure treated or redwood, but maybe it doesn't matter. If sometimes you might want it to decay and let the client who was thinking about doing a metal one just use a non-pressure treated, non-preservative laden piece of wood, and then it'll have to be replaced in 3 or 4 years. And Karina, can you grab the drill over there? I left it. So what we're gonna do is take this lovely little drill bit right here and a washer and a nut. Okay, so when I'm looking for this later, the washer and the nut are in my pocket. And we'll put this guy right here. Carson, any questions before we move to the next step? Okay, so we have to determine where this prop is gonna go. And ideally, let me step over here. I'll take that part off, don't worry. You want the prop to go on a perfectly horizontal limb. That's the ideal. We don't always get ideal out in nature. So on this particular limb, you can see where I found, Jake, if you follow the laser pointer, where are you right here? Okay, you got me right there? Okay, follow the laser pointer. There's a limb that comes out to right here. And right at the base of the limb, there's a swelling of the limb. And so that's where the prop is gonna end up. We're taking advantage of the swelling of the trunk right there to create kind of a false horizontal section that we can work on. I've already tied a plumb bob at that exact spot right there. And we use that to help us to know where the hole should be dug. You basically want that right on center. And I can see right now that this one isn't perfect. So we're gonna proceed, the show must go on. On the job site, right now the hole is centered right about here. And I can't really move the location of the prop overhead. So that means we would start digging this way to even it up. But ours will be crooked for today, but it's no big deal for the demonstration. But you do want to have this really, really centered when you're digging your hole. We usually go down 12 to 18 inches if we're doing a metal or a wooden prop into the soil. Now there's another option where we could just have a base either made out of wood or a chunk of steel with some brackets on it, and we can set it right on the ground, or maybe there's a patio right here and you're putting it right on the pavers. So, okay, drill bit. Oh, hilarious. The heck did I put the drill bit? Well, we'll use this one. Crazy. I'm going to end up sitting on it later because Okay, no drill bit. Okay, so using our super crazy precise measuring method, we're going to make a crisscross. Obviously, in real life, you would get a ruler out there, but we want to find that middle point. I think it's somewhere right around there. And I want to be real clear that in real life, this would be done in our shop. This would be mounted in a vise, and everything would be much more precise. And I do have a jig that will hold this vertical for me, but we're not going to use it today. So. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So that's the hole that we need to drill. And then this threaded rod, along with the nut and washer that are in my pocket. Oh, and there's the other drill bit I was looking for. We might have to re-drill the hole, we'll see. So we're gonna put the nut and washer on. And here's the basic gist. I'm gonna peel this guy off. We want this 12-inch section of rod to go down into that hole that we made. Sometimes the hole doesn't go straight, so we have to put a little muscle into it. Now ideally I would drill that hole down a lot further so that this piece of metal could seat even further. Now from here I can see it's not perfectly straight. And when we do it in the shop versus doing it while I'm holding it in my lap, it will go straight, but for demonstration purposes you'll get the point. That's it right there. That's our prop. We do have to do some measuring, and I think on this one we've got it all pre-measured, so but you have to measure, hang tight right here. Whew, we have to get my laser measurer here. Because what we want to know is pretty precisely what is the height, I call it the span length, from here to the point where the prop is going to go. And I could try to do this with two people and a laser point, two people and a traditional measuring tape. That comes out to 9.9 feet. Isn't it great when you use decimals and fractional measurements all in once? 9.9 feet. And we're going to dig a hole 12 inches deep. We have that done here already. So that means I'm going to need 10.9 feet. We could call that an 11-foot prop. The prop is 10 feet long, and I have almost a foot sticking out of it, so this should be sufficient right here. We just need one more thing, and we can put the whole thing together. I'm going to grab a ladder. Oh. That goes right about there. Oh, we can get rid of that because the mic, there we go. And now we're going to drill a hole into the tree. And normally I do that by having a nail going into the tree at the point where I want the prop to be connected. And an eye screw or a nail. And then the P-cord for the plumb bob hangs off of that. And so when I pull the nail out, I would see that that's the exact spot that the hole is going to be drilled. I'm just going to put a little mark right here to simulate that. 'Cause believe it or not, I had trouble finding a nail today. So we can pull the P-cord out of the way now. We don't need any more plumb bob action. And we'll throw that over there. And this is going to go right about here. And we're going to try to make it as vertical as possible. We're going up an inch or two. That's all it takes. We'll leave that right there for the moment. And now this part, is Bonner around? I think we need to put him to work. No? Let me see, we might be able to do it without him. I might need your help on this one, Nick. Yeah, hold on. Well, no, we're all right. We're good. We can go like this. Let me see if this will get into position. Oh yeah, okay. So we've got to go. No, we're good. We don't need any help now. Okay, so what I want to do is get that threaded rod into into the hole right there. So it's a little crooked right now, which I would never tolerate in a real setup. But at this point, the hole would be a little wider and we could move it left or right. And we could actually take our iPhone and we can go to the leveling app and we could check if we're level here. And I'm a little bit off on this one, but it doesn't take that much to see. I'm within a degree. That's pretty good. We'll roll with that. So now we're going to prepare the base of the tree, and I think for the sake of the demonstration, we're not going to actually do it. But this is a really amazing product when we're dealing with mid-load scenarios. It's an epoxy foam. We buy it at home at Lowe's. You can also get it called Secure Set on Amazon, and it's a two-part epoxy. This bag cost about 10 or 15 bucks. It wasn't too expensive. And you basically just pop them into each other and mix it. I think we're going to go ahead and do it just for the fun of it. Let me get my gloves on. One, two. Just so you guys can see how cool this stuff is. All right. Put this here. And what you do is roll this. And you got about 15 seconds to work once we break the seal. So I'm going to push, and now they're in together. And now I'm going to 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000, 7 1,000, 8 1,000. All right, let's stop right about there. Have a knife nearby. All right, so I think that's about 15 seconds. It's warm in my hand, and we're just going to pour all this goop around here. And that's way too much, actually, so this will be fun. We'll get to amplify the effect. This is going to expand like crazy because I put way too much in there. It expands, I think, 30 times its original size. So what I forgot is that we didn't dig this hole as deep as we normally do, nor did we dig it as wide as we normally do. But within 3 minutes, it's going to expand like crazy, and it's going to grab onto this wood, and it's going to serve as a base for us. We're going to end up with too much, and we'll have to cut it all off. It is easy, it's light, you don't have to deal with mixing concrete. It is not perfect for high load applications. So for us, when we're using a wood prop, that means we've decided that this isn't a huge tree. It's kind of arbitrary. And this is a place where the BMP has a weakness. We can't look at any charts in here about bracing and have it tell us if the limb diameter is X inches or smaller, use a wooden prop, and if it's bigger than that, use a metal prop. That doesn't exist. So this is foam. It's an epoxy foam. It's a two-part epoxy, and when it mixes together, it becomes just a hard foam, but it has really hard, like epoxy, it has good holding capacity. So once it's fully set, I'm sure it's still soft to the touch here.
How does that compare to like the spray insulation, the standing foam that we're all familiar with?
It is similar in concept to the spray insulation, but spray insulation doesn't have that epoxy-like holding power. This stuff, if you take a piece of it and try to break it, it has strength that you don't notice with the Great Stuff brand spray foam stuff. So normally when I do this, it only mounds up an inch or two too high, and we finish the top and then come back down, and you can just cut it flush and throw some dirt over it. But we're gonna leave it as it is for right now. We'll get the top of it finished up, and to do that, we're gonna need our 2 pliers again, and take this one off. Go up to the top, and what we're gonna do is use this nut and start tightening it. And if never done this before, so I don't know if it's actually going to work, but let's get these things set here. When we start tightening this, you'll actually be able to see the tree. So right now, it's pushing the nut down, which is pushing the threaded rod up. And right now the threaded rod is pushing up into that 3/4 inch hole that we drilled. So we got to do a couple inches first, and then so right about there. So we're at a point now where I can feel that the rod has bottomed out inside that hole, and I'm actually pushing the prop down. I can feel it getting more stable, and it's lifting the limb up just an incremental amount with each turn. And we're not trying to raise it here. So I'm not going to go very far. We're just going enough until we know that the limb is pressing down with all of its weight onto the rod. And the way you'll know is the wobbliness of the whole system will disappear on you. And that's a combination of the foam grabbing on down below and then the internal pressure that we've created. So that's it right there. Now, in an ideal setup, right now we have about 6 inches between here. You really only want that to be about 2 or 4 inches. It's harder to work getting the handle of the wrench around and stuff like that. So I cut this one a little shorter just for demonstration purposes. But yeah, exactly. This is going to provide a ton of strength that this limb didn't have before. And the whole installation, if you look, that really only took 15 or 20 minutes. It'll take you a little more on site because you're going to do it with precision. Let's chat for a little longer while that finishes setting. The final thing I want to show, we're officially, oh, okay, good. We've got some questions on the phone. I don't have, oh, this is getting really fancy here. It sounds like I have some text messages that are, am I calling Carson? No? Okay. Aha! Oh, cool. We got some text messages. This is cool. Now everyone,
Text Nick his phone number.
yeah, everyone else is going to text me. You guys know, most of you know my number. So when installing multiple through rods, should you place them closer together and parallel? Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, let's look at this tree. Can you see over here, Jake? We're going to let that foam set up for a minute. How do we put these rods in when we're putting multiples? Now, this is a really straight layout because we have 2 limbs and that's it. So we know we don't want them really close together. We want them at least 1 trunk diameter apart from each other. Further is even better. and you don't want them perfectly parallel to each other. You want them askew a little bit. And the reason for that is that wood has grain in it. And if we put a bunch of rods going down a limb, down a trunk, we're perforating the exact same piece of grain or really close to it, and we're actually creating a weakness in the tree. So if we put this one in perfectly straight, this one in a little bit crooked to the left, this one in a little bit crooked to the right, just a little bit, you're getting different angles of pull, which is increasing the strength of the overall system, and you're also avoiding the weaknesses of the tree, of the parallel systems. If we want to put a cable in this tree, we need to make a decision on how high up that cable is going to go. And the general guideline is approximately 2/3 of the way up from the union to the top of those two limbs. Approximately 2/3. You might fudge the numbers a little bit if you think that's appropriate for that particular setup. But in a normal standard setup where the limbs come up and they're evenly spaced, and it's a nice vertical limb, you're going to go to the union, look at the top of the tree, come down 1/3 of the way. That's where the cable's going to go. Where things get tricky is when people top trees and now you're cabling trees that were once topped. You probably have to go right up to the top, because that's what would have been 2/3 of the tree had they not topped it. Or like this tree, when one limb goes up and one goes up and then goes out. 2/3 of the way would be way out here, but it's horizontal limbing, so you need to come down to that curve, and that's the best you can do in those situations. It isn't perfect. Let's see, what else? What type of drill bit works best? Oh, that's a really good question. And I should have showed you with the big giant one, but we're going to get a close-up here with Jake. This drill bit is called an auger drill bit, and it has a little screw. It's actually threaded on the end, so you don't actually need to push in really hard when you're drilling. The screw will bite into the wood and pull it through, and we call it an auger because of the threaded area. When you have to drill really big holes or really long holes, it's the best way to do it. The regular drill bits that just come to a point, they might be okay for a 12-inch hole, but when you're getting anything longer than that, you should look for an auger style drill bit. Thank you to whoever asked that question. Carson, is that all we got for questions? Yeah. Okay, just a couple things to talk about, and then we're gonna shut this down. Let's see, I think we're set over here. All right, I'll do your job in a moment. Let me finish doing mine. All right, so we can cut through here, and sometimes, yeah, this might break right off for us. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
We talked briefly about a tree in a public area that may need cabling. The risk and the liability there.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what we're going to close with. All right, so let's get this guy out of here. Okay. That's pretty good right there. It doesn't look pretty at all, but if you take some dirt, put that over it, that would be sufficient. And in the field, in an actual job, I'd go down a little deeper and then leave a 2-inch layer of dirt to hide that. This thing is pretty darn solid now. I don't think it's going anywhere, and we're gonna have a heck of a time pulling it out when we're done at the end here. The other propping option is a metal prop, and metal props are the best way to install a prop. They last nearly forever. You have to get someone to build the prop for you if you, like me, don't know how to weld. In our company, we use 2-inch or 4-inch Schedule 40 pipe. 2-inch Schedule 40 pipe, I'd have to look it up, but it's several thousand pounds compression strength. That doesn't mean it can hold that much weight under all of the tension, but it's extremely strong and way stronger than a wooden prop. our setup is the same. I have our welders weld a plate on the top. It's the same diameter as the outside diameter of the pipe, drill a hole in the middle, and then weld a nut on the hole. And then it functions exactly as this one did here. The crummy part about that is that I don't know how to weld, and there aren't welders next door to my shop. So we found a guy that's way over there, and when we build a prop, I have to call him and say, hey, how much for one that's this long, made out of 4-inch pipe, and is 12 feet long or whatever, and then he gives me the price. There's a lot of back and forth. It's really annoying. It's the best thing we can do right now. Then when he gives me the thumbs up that it's ready, I have to pay an employee to go get it and bring it to the job site. All of this increases the installation cost for the client. And that leads me to, I think, the favorite thing I'm going to show you today. Woo! A gentleman named Mike Ames from Russell Tree Expert Company made this with me and for me. And all it is I call it a prop cap. And by showing it to you, I can no longer patent it. So it's now public domain. And this one's made out of aluminum, I think high load, excuse me?
You have 12 months from today.
Oh, from today to get it patented?
File a provisional.
You got it. I'll get right on that. And it's just a threaded tube of metal. This one's aluminum. And the idea is that you would take a piece of Schedule 40 and slide this guy down and in. It fits nice and snug, and that's by design. And eventually, this is the prototype here. We'll have a little hole that gets drilled right there, and then a little threaded hole on the side of the prop, and then you can put a set screw in right here so it doesn't come right out on you. And you get it in position, thread this up into the tree, and again, you only have a few inches sticking out right here. And then optional, but highly recommended, is put this nut down on top of it. The prop cap itself is threaded, but this one will add a lot more strength and security. I think Mike did an amazing job on this thing. It looks really professional. It is 2 different colors, but who cares about that? This makes it so that you don't have to contact a welder and coordinate all this kind of stuff. You can have these caps sitting on your shelf in 2 or 3 sizes and have the pipe in several sizes cut to fit on the job site. Schedule 40 cuts really easy with our battery powered grinders. And then at our company, our recommendation is if we're doing a metal pipe, we're going to use concrete down in the hole and not the epoxy foam down there. So I think that wraps up the actual, the technical part of things. We have to talk about one other thing here that may be the most important thing you have in mind whenever you're considering doing any sort of supplemental support system on a tree. Liability, risk, lawyers, what does this mean for your clients? There are some people that will look at this prop and say that this is an acknowledgement. Yeah, let me set this one down real quick. And Mike Ames, thank you so much for that thing. It's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. So can't wait to get a whole bunch of them made up. Some people will look at a bolt, a prop, or a cable and say, you put that there because the tree had a defect. And if there's ever a problem later, then that's on you, liability-wise, or that's on the property owner. And I think that's a really goofy way of looking at life. And if you talk to enough lawyers, you find out that that's not the standard way of looking at things. Think of it as the brakes in your car. When a mechanic looks at your car, that's a professional who knows about cars, they can look at your brakes and they can tell you that you have a defect that needs to be addressed. So they put new brakes on there, and that's to fix the defect, to address that defect. Sometimes it's not something that needs to be replaced, it just needs to be corrected, it needs to be tightened. And no one would ever say that that was a goofy decision. It's a professional advising you and then taking steps to make the correction. And that's exactly what's going on here. Now, some folks were asking, what about putting this in a park or something like that? Is this a liability now should someone not have a picnic under this tree. I would love for people to have picnics right here under this tree after we put the props and cables and everything like that in. I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe I've added enough strength to the system to overcome weaknesses that would still show themselves in normal day-to-day activity. A big storm could knock this whole tree over. A big storm could rip half of it out, even with a cable, a prop, and two bolts in here. We can never stop every tree failure in every storm. But what we do know is the likelihood for failure has plummeted now that we've added this supplemental support. And we also know there's a really low likelihood that in a giant storm, there's going to be a family of kids, a family with kids having a picnic under this tree. They're going to get in their car and leave when things start to get crazy. So, Carson, do we have any other final questions? No. Okay. Thank you guys very much. I need to mention, you want to come on in, Nick? I don't have all this stuff.
Thank you.
Woo! Hit the like button and give me lots of love, and the little smiley one and the wow one.
Pay Nick unless you get, what was it? It was like 2,000 of the thumbs up.
Yeah, but it's $5 per thumbs up that I get.
God.
So
do not hit the thumbs up button, please. I'd like to thank Nick.
Yes.
His wonderful wife, Karina, co-owner.
Woohoo! Thank you, Karina.
I'd like to recognize Tree Care LA. Obviously, you guys are I think probably the most premium tree service in America.
I paid them to say
they
that.
only use electric leaf blowers because they don't want to make noise. They use vegetable oil. You guys have really done something pretty special out there, charging for estimates, and you've shared a lot of that knowledge with us over the years.
Yes, exactly.
And I know people want you to come back and do another business seminar, maybe?
Oh yeah, we're ready to do the business summit. We loved it.
Okay.
We've already been talking about new topics for the next business summit.
So hopefully we'll get Karina to speak maybe for that one. I do want to mention Jambo again. We've got 13th, 14th, and 15th of July coming up here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We'll be at Holiday Park, the world's largest climbing competition. We've got events. It's free to attend. You can bring your family. We're going to do some really crazy stuff this year. We're going to hang a rope from a crane, put a bucket truck up in the air. You're going to jump out of the bucket attached to the rope hanging from the crane, swing to the precipice of the swing, and then try to throw your limbs into buckets that are between 50 and 100 feet beyond the precipice of the swing. And you'll have like 4 or 6 limbs to throw, and basically until you come to a complete stop, you can keep throwing them to try to get the highest point. So anybody can do that. Show up, support our charity events. We'll be doing raffles for the Fallen Families Fund, which is a charity we started this year.
Awesome.
We just launched the website for that. It's fallenfamiliesfund.org. We are an official 501c3 charity. We're registered with the government, nonprofit. That's a super cool endeavor.
Yeah.
We pay all of the administrative costs, so if you donate any money to that, 100% of it goes
straight to the families.
Straight to families. So,
awesome.
fallenfamiliesfund.org, and stay tuned. We're going to be down in Puerto Rico for the next 7 or 8 days. Carson and I will both be down there with some other people from the Notch team and like 15 arborists from all around the United States. Doug's coming from as far as Maui, and we'll be helping restore some of the lingering damage from Hurricane Maria. So that's good stuff. Carson is posting the link right now
for the CEU quiz.
CEU quiz. You will find that in the comments of this stream, as well as in a completely independent post on the treestuff.com Facebook. If you liked this, please send us an email, media@treestuff.com. Let us know what you liked about the broadcast, if anything. Please give us feedback in the comments and on the quiz.
I'll say one more thing.
Yeah.
I love talking about this and duking it out with people or just teaching people about this topic. You're allowed to email me directly, nick@treecarela.com. If you have questions that didn't get answered, we could have gone 6 hours on this, no problem, but I didn't want to put you guys to sleep. So feel free to shoot me that email, and me or Karina will look at it and help you the best we can. Unless we get hundreds of them, then we won't.
Nick's also available for basic technical questions. So if you want to know, like if you can put a rope runner above a ART spider jack, Nick@TreeCareLA or Nick@treestuff.com. Usually I field those questions. Like it's usually, can I put a rope wrench above insert any one of our 10,000 products?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to know if you can put a rope wrench above a piece of threaded rod, ask Nick.
And I also want to point out that almost everything we saw here today, the threaded rods, the really long drill bits,
you stole from us.
I got it from the shelves right here. So you don't have to make all these trips to your hardware store to get it. You're already ordering from Tree Stuff as it is. So you get yourself a nice drill and you're ready to get to work.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
We are really excited to continue to grow this program. We've invested a tremendous amount of time and money into providing you guys with better and higher quality broadcasts. We've worked very hard this year on expanding our internet capabilities to outdoor broadcasts. This is by far the best one we've done yet. A ton of credit goes to Carson Royer and his brother Cale Royer. Cale is on deployment right now. He's on we're calling it a Western Asian vacation. It's some sandy place like Afghanistan or something. So Cale's off defending our freedom.
Yep.
But he put a ton of work in that still shows in this broadcast. Carson again on the sticks, and Jake on the camera all night. Big round of applause for those guys.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Hit the heart button and show those guys some love. They certainly appreciate it.
All right.
That's
Let's
it.
close it out.
Thanks a lot.
All right.